All right. Well, hey, guys. How are you doing? It's great to be here with you guys tonight. My name is Caleb. If you guys don't know me, I am the director of RPK, which is our kids ministry here at the church at Rocky Peak. And, as you guys know, you're tuning in, we're having our homeschooling panel. And really just want to give you a little bit of context as to what this is about and why we're doing it. And then we'll have you meet our panel. But we were hearing a lot of parents, obviously, with the changes that were happening with the public schools and that being completely virtual and things like that, that a lot of parents, were considering homeschooling for the first time, because in reality, we're all going to be homeschooling this year to some extent because we're going to be trying to teach our kids at home, right? And so we wanted to get this panel together to be able to just address some of the questions that come. And really, we kind of, as we talked about it, we feel like there's pretty much three categories. If you're watching right now, you've either considered homeschooling for a long time, maybe for years, but you've never quite made the switch into homeschooling. Maybe your kids are public or private school. And so you're tuning in to see what that looks like. Maybe you've never considered homeschooling and you're just wanting to see if this might be a better option for this year. Maybe you can plan on going back to the public or the private school next year after this is all over, and you're just interested in what that looks like. And maybe you're on the fence, or you don't even know if homeschooling is right for you, but you wanted to tune in and find out a little bit more about what it's all about. So that's really our purpose tonight, is to just inform you guys, inform our viewers, whatever questions you may be having. So our goal tonight is just to make sure that after this is over, you have a clear understanding of what that homeschool option looks like, and hopefully you have some stuff to pray about, and you're a little wiser about what it looks like, and you're able to make that decision as to whether or not this is the route that you want to take for this year and maybe years to come. So I'm really excited to get into this with everything, but before we do, I definitely want to open us up in prayer, because we want, in all things, to come before the Lord about these really big decisions that we're making. So we're going to go ahead and pray. God, we just come before you tonight, and just thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much for this panel of parents who have had experience homeschooling their kids. I thank you so much for the homeschooled parents that are not on this panel, that have guided our thoughts and our process through this journey, as we've had conversations with them as well. God, I thank you for the families, the parents that are tuning in, that are watching right now, that have questions, that aren't sure what to do. Things are turned upside down right now. There's so much stress going on with what's going to happen with my job. We know that parents have lost their jobs. Some parents haven't, but they're trying to work from home and take care of their kids. And there's just a lot right now. And we just acknowledge that. But we acknowledge that you're in control of that, and that you are watching over us, that you have a plan for us, that this does not have to be a lost year for our kids educationally or socially, that you're going to guide us through that. And so tonight we just pray that even as we talk about this, God, that in the homes of the families that are watching, that your Holy Spirit would just be there, that you would just give them wisdom as for what your plan is for this year for them and for their kids, and that at the end of this night, God, we just pray they would have a great understanding of what the next steps are, and can move forward with that. God, we just thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so before we get started, it makes sense to introduce you guys to our panel. And so we're going to start off with quick introductions. So just to remind you guys, like your name, the kids that you have, how many kids do you have, their age ranges, what your experience is with homeschooling, because one thing I love about this panel is there's just a wide variety. Some of you are right in the mix right now. Some of you have done it. You've been there, done that. And so we want to get familiar with who you guys are. So we'll start with you, Elena.
My name is Elena. I have 4 children. We have been homeschooling for 8 years. This year will be 8th grade, 6th grade, and kindergarten, and I have a 3-year-old.
Wow. Okay. All right.
And my name is Crystal. We have 3 kids that we homeschooled. They have successfully graduated from high school, and we started them when they were in 4th grade, 3rd grade, and 1st grade. So the youngest went from 1st grade all the way through 12th grade.
Awesome. Great.
My name is Abby, and I've been homeschooling for 7 years. I have 3 boys, This year there'll be 7th grade, 5th grade, and the youngest is starting kindergarten.
Wow.
My name is Jeff James, and we've been homeschooling since my oldest son was in 2nd grade, and he went all the way through and graduated. My second son all the way through, and my daughter is now in 10th grade. So we've been homeschooling about 16 years through a variety of different ways of homeschooling.
Okay.
My name is Victoria Strada. This will be my 4th year homeschooling. I have an 8th grader who's 12 and a 2nd grader who's 7.
Awesome. All right, so that gives you guys a little bit of an idea of who is on our panel and what their experience is. Now, I do want to kind of preface this, right? Like, we know that again, some of you guys are interested in homeschool for the first time. Some of you are looking at it just as an option for this year. But we just want to be clear, like, our goal is not to convince anyone that homeschooling is the way to go. I mean, we firmly believe that a lot of our families, the right decision is public school or private school or homeschooling, but that's a decision that we want you to be led by the Lord in. And so, but I do have to say, we have this panel together of people who homeschool. And so they're going to be advocating for that, but in no way do we want you to feel like we're trying to convince you to homeschool. So again, our goal is just that you're informed on what that looks like. So the first question I want to start out with, just kind of get things rolling here. I imagine you're a parent. This news came out a couple weeks ago. You realize that school is starting. A lot of the parents haven't even gotten that schedule, what that looks like yet. And so they're thinking, well, even if I did try to homeschool, is it too late? I have no idea what it looks like do you register for homeschool? How do you sign up for that? How do you make sure that your kids are in compliance with the state? How do you make sure that they'll pass the grade that they're going to go into? Things like that. So I just want to start it off with that. How do you make sure if you're sitting at home right now, first of all, is it possible to get them ready for this school year? And second of all, not to get too specific, but what does that look like?
Absolutely. It's absolutely doable. I think the first thing is first breathe. It's a very daunting thing. It's a very scary thing. And there's tons of rabbit holes. It's very much like the typical internet. You can get on there and you will be on there for hours and hours. So the first thing is it's so wonderful that Rocky Peak is doing this, that it brings some resources. But the first thing, honestly, is breathe. And second is pray. First two things, absolutely go before the Lord and say, okay, God, this has not surprised you in the least bit. It has surprised the heck out of me. Or maybe it hasn't surprised me completely, but what do I do? Okay, now practical steps. So, some of it might be, okay, we stay with the public schools and we do virtually. But okay, I can't stay and my child be on the computer every 30 minutes or whatever that might look like. And maybe that schedule starts coming out. There's affidavits that you can sign that you can withdraw your student, but that's only done between October 1st and October 15th. So you have time, and these are some things that you can start doing. And even though technically school's supposed to start in the next few weeks, there's still time. And there's still time between even now and even in October for things to happen. And in the first few weeks of school at any point in any time of history that has begun, and especially right now, it's always beginning of school time. Everybody's just getting back into school. There's a lot of grace periods, so give yourself also that same kind of grace. So take a deep breath. There are some very practical steps. Other people will have some very practical steps too, and there's a lot more specifics in that, but I think the first thing to know is that, yes, there is time. Yes, this can be done, and you can take the first steps, and if you don't like those first couple of steps, you still have time to change those next steps that happen.
And real quickly, we're part of a homeschool group where for some of the students, we do their full paperwork and they're under our umbrella. And there's new students coming in right now because we're full. They have to come in as associate members. And so one of the biggest things about starting this is the unknown. I'd have to say the biggest fear is the unknown. So one of the other dads on the board said, we want to offer them the ability to help them fill out the affidavit for the state of California. So he actually did research on it, and after I talked to him, he said, I don't want to use the word easy. He said, this is very doable. And there's a lot of resources that teach you. There's YouTube videos that teach you how to do this. So the biggest fear to get started is the unknown. But once you get to that form and you know that there's resources to help you and other people to help you, it is, I'm going to use the word doable.
Okay, awesome. So now another thing that I wanted to ask, if a parent is planning on enrolling their kid in the fall, there's nothing that says like they can't get halfway through September and then decide like, oh yeah, this is not working out. So that am I right in that at any point they can kind of say I'm going to withdraw my kid from public school or from the private school, and man, we're diving in. We're going to try the homeschooling thing this year. That's possible, right? Yeah, Victoria.
That's actually what happened to us when my oldest was going into first grade. We realized that the school wasn't meeting her needs academically, and so we pulled her out after school had already begun, and that was all new to me. But the first thing I did, like Abby said, is breathe and then pray. And I said, God, what do you want me to do? And God was very clear, and the way I knew it was very clear is because it wasn't challenging, it was doable. And the doors got opened, and it wasn't challenging as in my mind, I was making all these ideas that I thought, what am I doing? But it was actually very doable, and God led us through it all, and just breathe and pray, because these are God's kids, and He's going to take care of them.
Yeah. Well, and Victoria, what you just said is something that, like, as we talked and got together, all of you guys said, which I thought was, it just aligns perfectly with what we always talk about, which is listen and follow. And I think sometimes, and I know I'm guilty of this, it's just certain things are so routine to us as parents, even like public school, like, but I think this is a great time for all parents just to step back. And that's one thing I heard from every single one of you was that not just a decision on homeschooling, but every year to go before God and say, is that what's right for my kid this year? And I felt challenged by that because, I've always thought, oh, my kids are in school. That's what we do. And I was like, wow, yeah, I need to go before the Lord and say, what do you want for him this year? And I think that's also, you guys mentioned that you're not making a lifelong decision, that you're asking, hey, God, what is it for this year? What is it for next year? We'll get to next year when we get there. I think that was really something I took away as a parent.
I would also encourage you that when you're praying yourself, there's so much benefit for you and your spouse to be able to pray and say, okay, what are we supposed to do? But there's a huge amount of benefit to pray with your kids, actually, and to discuss with your kids what's going to go on, and to ask your kids like, hey, this is all new for me. I don't know what I'm doing. I need you to be patient with me, and I'm going to do my best to be patient with you. Because we hear over and over and over again, people say, oh, I could never do that. I'd be so frustrated with my kids. And yeah, there are going to be times that you're frustrated, and there's going to be times that they're frustrated with you. But when you constantly take that to the Lord and you can have those conversations, and when you make a mistake and you blow it, maybe you yell at somebody, going back and asking for forgiveness so that you're actually modeling that for them, I think goes a long way to building their character. And for sure, I'm sure that every one of us would agree that homeschooling, built our character as well.
Yeah. Well, I was a product of public school. I had plenty of teachers yell at me. So yelling at a student, that's okay. You're good. That's just normal. That was the daily routine. Okay. So then the next thing that I know I've thought about, and I've heard lots of parents, is like readiness, academic readiness. Not just no one's going to knock on our door and say, get your kid in school, but next year is going to come around. And if I'm thinking about doing this for 1 year, how do I make sure as a parent that my kid is ready for the next year?
I think this was a big thing for me when I first started homeschooling, when God called us to it. Growing up, I had family friends that were homeschooled, and unfortunately, your kind of typical stereotype of what you thought of homeschoolers, and it wasn't a very good picture. And so, like those wonderful things that God loves to do, I told God I would never do that. He likes to do that in my life, and goes, oh, really? And so, and homeschooling today does not look, thankfully, like it did then. And honestly, maybe also that family just was that situation. But when he brought me into it, I was very scared, and I'm the kind of person too where I like to have all my information. Tell me exactly what I'm supposed to do, give me a list, give me the goals, give me those, what's everybody else doing, and especially as a parent, a first-time parent too, you grow up with the pediatrician even telling you your milestones, and so like it's just natural that you go into that. Going into grade school. Well, here I had a child who was very different, and he was excelled in some areas, but he lacked in other areas. And so I was very, very concerned, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, none, and I was just terrified. There are tons, and each state, the nation itself, but each state also has standard rules, Common Core, some of it is listed. You can find all that information on websites, each state educational website. You can find that. It's also in curriculum. And so there's a kind of a backbone and an outline of basic educational things that people will know and understand at each grade level, that at the end of this grade level, a child should know, just like when you go to a pediatrician, and they have at each age that a child should be able to walk. He should be able to say his name.
Right.
He should be able to, in each grade, they have those basic things. And honestly, that's what you basically need to cover. And so there's not, at the younger ages, I cannot speak to, and thankfully this panel is filled with people of all different walks, and I look up to, but I'm not at that stage yet. But the elementary age, they're not gonna come and ask that you pass a test and you have to fill out these, like, okay, well, he didn't, first quarter, he didn't make an A or a B. There's none of that. It is general, and especially with what's going on right now with our country and COVID, everybody is going to have so much grace because everybody is struggling right now. So the key right now is lots of grace for yourself, lots of grace as parents, lots of grace as family, lots of grace for kids, but reading, writing, and math, that is the key. Just every day, the child needs to be in math, and the child needs to be reading and writing.
Yeah.
That's the core. That's what we call skill subjects.
Yeah.
And so getting into that, and then from that you fan out into the other subjects. And that will be the backbone, and you can find that information of what your grade level of your students will be doing. But there's not in the younger elementary level, and in some of the lower middle school levels of you have to pass this grade. By the end of the year, you'll have a thing. High school, somebody else has to speak to that. I know that's different.
And just on that same subject, at the end of our year, we do a promotion for all the different grades. And so one of the things I was doing for that, for each grade, I was asking them trivia questions to make sure that they could pass. I was kind of a little graduation ceremony. I'd ask each class a question. But what I did in the research was that I went and said, what does a fifth grader need to know? And I came upon these websites after websites, and it tells you everything, a first grader, second grader, third grader, every grade it tells you exactly what you need to know from the state of California. And I was able to get my trivia questions from them, like, oh, they should know about Abraham Lincoln or the Emancipation Proclamation. And so if you just start, again, it's the unknown. And once you start researching, it opens it up, and you're like, wow, there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah.
And I just want to add too, it sounds so daunting and scary, but really if you pick a curriculum and you go through it, by the end of the year, they will know all that they should know for whatever grade that is, fifth grade or sixth grade or whatever it is. It really flows naturally. And then there are placement tests or things if you want to check and just verify for yourself. But really, if you go through a curriculum and you decide to put your child back into public school, you really do not have to worry about them being behind or not being able to get back into the school.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me as a parent, right? Like, yeah, I mean, I'm the target audience here, and I just thought it really brings into light the fact that I think as a parent, you just have this overall sense of like, man, I don't want to mess my kids up, And so now it's like your education, at least you're like, well, hey, that's not an area that I'm messing them up. Maybe the school is, but it's not me. It's not on me. But it's if you take that mantle and say, all right, I'm going to homeschool. You have to really think through. So hearing you guys, knowing that there's clear ways to do it. It sounds so simple, but you have a a book of math curriculum for 5th grade, and at the end of the year, if they can do this, they're ready. And I think another point that you guys made up or that you guys talked about was even if they may not be ready, they may be behind in some areas, and that's okay. Abby, you alluded to it right then a little bit, but there's going to be certain areas where they excel. They're at a reading level way higher than their age, and so it's just about balance and knowing what areas to focus on.
That's actually one of the beautiful things when you actually fully homeschool, where you can take online classes, which my kids did some when they were in high school. You can take an online class, but again, you give over the all of the ability to control what's going on. But especially when they're younger, if you see your child excelling at reading, you can give them harder reading material. If you see them struggling at math, you can ask them to work more on their math facts. It's not a matter of we have to be done by June 13th. And I will say that if any of you talk to my kids, they will absolutely tell you that they hated the fact that I made them complete the math books. Because in traditional school, you don't have to complete the books.
Yeah.
When the class is over, the class is over.
Yeah.
And so for us, math was one of those things we felt very much like Abby, where reading, writing, and arithmetic were the things that had to be, they were non-negotiables. And not that the others were negotiable, but if you could read, you could do history. If you could write, you could make your papers. If you could do math and read, you could do science. So we knew that from that basis, they could do everything else. But yes, there's if you're doing it just on your own, you can really tailor it to the child. So I had one child that was going so fast in math, I actually slowed her down. And others that I was able to say, okay, we're going to use this curriculum instead because it's more advanced, and give them more work to do. So you can actually tailor to what they're doing. And if you have a child who's really struggling, you can just continue to work. And there's nothing to say that that's wrong, because at that point in time, you're really getting them to have the basis.
Yeah.
So that they can then grow, as opposed to sitting in class, having the class move past you, and they don't know what they've been doing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that actually, we'll use that as a segue. That was a question I was going to have for later, but one of the advantages that you guys talked about, and I know this is a big issue for a lot of parents who typically, their kids are in public or private school, is this whole idea of flexibility. Like a lot of our families, both parents are working and they're waiting to kind of see what the schedule looks like. And it's overwhelming to know, am I going to be able to do my job from home and make sure that my kids are online where they need to be, doing what they need to do. But I know that you guys talked about that being a really positive thing with homeschooling in general, is the flexibility. So what does that look like? What does homeschooling flexibility look like?
Well, it's interesting because it looks different for everybody. Again, that's the great thing about flexibility. And I was talking to a parent recently, and she was saying about how she was one of her kids she was keeping in the public system, and one of her children she was thinking of removing and possibly homeschooling. And she was scared, and it was daunting, which we all are. And I definitely was, and there's times I still am. And one of the reasons is that this public school system currently that she was dealing with is they're trying to make the public school come into her home. And so you can't do that. That's one of the mistakes that we all make. We all have done it. Well, I think we've all done it. I've done it multiple times, and many people that I talk to have done it. And so that's the great thing about flexibility and it works so well with people that are dual, both parents, both spouses working, is that you set up stuff where, and again, people try to go, okay, well, when they're in school, they have to have 6 subjects or 7 subjects, and they have to have 30 minutes at each time. And then to try to set up this outline of timeline, and they have to be at each, and then instead of combining things together, instead of understanding that playing, again, I'm thinking more elementary school age, because that's my life and my world. But it's like when they play in the sand and they build a castle, we're going to start talking about medieval times. And so now we're in history. and yet they're playing. They're outside, they're in the sandbox, they're playing. And we start talking about medieval history. Well, then we go from sand, and now we start talking about ocean, because now a wave comes in. We pour a bucket. One of my sons comes in and just pours water. And, now instead of just an argument starts to happen. But then we start talking about waves and oceans and puddles. Now we're going into science. And again, we're still in play, but we move into a next subject. And so things combine together. And so, but then you have also schedules. And so as far as working, I've had friends that work. I have been very blessed that I do not work, but my husband does. But I have friends that also work and homeschool full time. And what they do is they set up certain kind of things and go, okay, what's an activity that you really want to do? What's a fun thing that you really want to do? And they plan the playtime or the fun thing that their kid wants to do for that day, and they go, okay, that is when I'm going to have my conference call, or that's when I'm going to put out those emails. And then they set up, okay, well, you're going to do your math when I need to independently sit down with you and have a lesson with you. I'm going to do this. And no, okay, you're going to need to read. You're going to need to read for 15 minutes. Well, when you're reading for 15 minutes, I'm going to be doing these emails for 15 minutes. So you're not having to sit there and do that with that child, but it's quiet during that time.
Yeah.
So you have those kind of again, and you schedule certain things that way, and you tag team with the spouse, vice versa. My husband is amazing in literature and English. Even though that's my only language, I'm horrible at it. But I'm really good at math. And so we tag team on that. And at times when my oldest is really, really good at vocabulary, and I can't spell for the lick of it, but my husband would come home and work with my oldest at that. And then, but I would work with math in the morning with my kids. So we tag team and we work together. And then we also know that when my husband is doing some big event, and my husband happens to work at a church, and so he ends up working the most during holidays. So for us, homeschooling works really well because most public schools are out during holidays, and we flip that. So we work the most during holidays and take only a day or two off. And when people are when holidays are, and then when he's able to kind of take some time off, when the holiday stuff is done, Easter, Christmas, that kind of stuff, we're like, we get dad back. We get to actually spend and see him. Let's get to do stuff with him and give those adventures.
Well, and when it comes to forgive me, I don't remember who said this, but I know, again, the idea of trying to fit public school into your home, like this idea of that's homeschooling. And so we need to be available from 8 to 3 every single day. I know it's eye-opening to me to start to find out that, a parent doesn't need to dedicate 6 to 8 hours each day to stand there and instruct the child. So you guys, if you're a parent and you're both working, and this is what I don't remember, somebody had said that they either do stuff before the parent kind of does their work from home or in the evenings, but they kind of schedule this around because now you're realizing that you need 180 days of education, but that those are not 6-hour days, that they can be a couple hours, because it's one-on-one or, one-on-3, but that it can be in the evenings before or after dinner. It can be on a Saturday. So
it also makes a big difference, the age of the child. Once they're in high school, most kids are independent enough that they might be able to say, I'm not going to do anything in the morning, but I'm going to work in the afternoon, the evening. So it just depends also on the children. When they're really little, you're probably best to have to really try to get them in the morning before they start getting tired. But the older they get, the more independent they become, and the more able they are to be able to make their own schedule flex as well.
Yeah.
For our family, part of the flexibility, we took our kids on a lot of missions trips, and so they'd take missions trips during the traditional school year, and we could just extend our school year for them to get their schoolwork done into summer. And I had been brought up to really value education, and so schooling wasn't a joke. We were going to finish it, and we were going to do as much of the books as we could do, and we were going to learn as much as we could do. We had a policy on math. They couldn't move on until they could pull an A on the test. If they were pulling B's on the test, they had to go back and review the chapters and then redo tests until they could do that, because I really wanted that foundation to be really solid. They weren't always so thrilled with me about that. If I had to do it over again, I might be a little bit more relaxed. I think their foundation was really solid. But that did, when we would take mission trips and those kind of things, it would push our school a little bit into summer, but they'd gotten to do something that was really valuable. My girls spent 2 weeks in Italy working with Youth with a Mission, and their job was to make connections with the athletes that were in this small town that we were visiting, so that the pastor would have access because he was new. So they got to go and, meet people who, to this day, my youngest was 13 and she's 20 now, so that's 7 years ago. To this day, she still keeps in contact with a number of those kids that were in Italy.
Yeah. So Jeff, I remember when we were talking about this, you were like, you're very passionate about this, which is this idea that like homeschooling it's not a break, right? It's not, it's that there's a level of like Chris was just talking about that. And I mean, your kids are evidence of this by what they've been able to accomplish, especially Jeff and Crystal. But why don't you tell a little bit about like your thoughts about homeschooling and the intentionality that you have in making sure their education is strong?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking about the flexibility, because one of the things I talked about at our pre-meeting was this is a very serious thing that we're all doing. We don't go into homeschooling as, hey, this is a way to, to have utter flexibility where it's, you can do what you want. You can't do what you want. There's the state requirements, and especially with our school, we make sure that the days are filled out, that the report cards are filled out, that the paperwork is filled out. So we're very, very serious about all of this. But that's the biggest thing that I was concerned with, was that people know that homeschooling is a very serious thing.
Right.
But as far as the curriculum, yeah, when I first went into homeschooling, my biggest concern was we are not going to be able to compete with my kids. Will they have the education that they need?
Right.
And so one thing I learned about the greatest teachers that I had back when, because I went to public school all the way through LA, and the greatest teachers I had were the ones that were passionate about teaching the kids and loved the kids. I remember those teachers. And when I think about all these moms, and I know hundreds of homeschool moms now, every single one of them is passionate and love teaching their kids. And those are the greatest teachers, is the ones that really care about it.
Yeah.
And so, and my wife Stephanie is very, very, very passionate and serious about it. And my kids, when Joey finally got to college, I'll just give one little brag moment, if I can have one brag moment.
Yeah, we're going to brag.
Because this really solidified my concern about, am I going to graduate a kid who can compete at Moore Park College? He did an English paper, his first semester at Moore Park, and I'm like, okay, how do we do? And the teacher used that as the example paper on how to write a paper, and I went, oh, okay, we got through. We taught him. He's good. He can compete and it was very rewarding to know that he got that achievement. And then, my kids throughout Moore Park, and even my other son is at Channel Islands, they're all doing very well. And even Carly is taking classes at Moore Park College as a 9th grader, and she's getting very good grades, and she's getting those units, and we'll talk more about that later. So because Stephanie was so serious and had her heart in it, like all these moms do, that's where the success comes.
Yeah.
And they are, and I've graduated a lot of kids through our school, and I look at each one of them, and I know they are all very well equipped to handle anything.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the point too. Like, every homeschool parent doesn't have a doctorate. They didn't graduate from Harvard, right? But what the connection you're making is that it has more to do with their intentionality and their passion and wanting what's best for their kids. That's where you see their kids go on to be successful. So if you're at home and you're like, I'm not a teacher, I don't even know this stuff. I mean, there's so many examples of kids, and we were talking about earlier, there comes a point where your kid is just learning beyond your level of teaching. So it's really just about helping them stay on track and keeping them motivated. So don't feel overwhelmed that you have to be some amazing teacher if you're going to be able to do this.
And it's with everything with a parent. If you're involved and you spend time with your kids, that's where they're going to excel.
Yeah.
And that's really, and that's just really important with every aspect of raising your children.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just to echo that, to me, our greatest calling is to train our children. So that's like passion right there, right, as a parent. And I think we all probably feel the same way. And as far as the flexibility that you were asking, as we're talking, it reminded me that when I did homeschool my daughter for the first time, when she was going into first grade, and all of this was new to me, and God said, yes, homeschool her, I had a brand new baby. I was still working.
Wow.
And so I know a lot of parents are in that situation with working. Mm-hmm. And so, especially with the status right now of everything. And so what I would do, and that was like a huge blessing that homeschooling is so flexible, because I would see my clients in and out, just, okay, this is when I'm going to be able to see you. This is when I can do this. And it doesn't have to be a structured, this is from 8 to 3 or 8 to 2. Mm-hmm. And something that I felt calmed when I was going into it, somebody who was an expert homeschooler said, remember, the public school or, private school, they are in there from 8 to 3 because they have recess, they have lunch, they have 30 or so average students. And so so that's why it takes up so much time.
Right.
So to just give that peace to parents now that it's not that same scenario in your home. So it is very flexible.
Yeah. So Victoria, I did want to ask you, because your experience is a little unique. So I'm thinking the parents that are sitting out there right now that are like, I'm going to be working. I'm going to try this out. I need that kind of flexibility to work with my kids when I have the time to work with them. But they have concerns about, well, what's going to happen when I essentially take my kid out of the school that they go to for an entire year? How does that look when I just throw them back in, right? And so why don't you share a little bit, of your experience with Lourdes and how she responded to that actual scenario?
Sure. At first, I think just the idea of being homeschooled was strange to her, as it was to me. But we homeschooled her for first and second grade, and it was amazing because I got to know her. I got to know her learning style. I got to know how she absorbs it. Found out she's very artistic, so I was able to model the learning to her style. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is I'm not artistic, so it was kind of like, whoa, what am I doing? But it was so much fun learning about her. And then my husband and I, we decided that, well, let's put her back in school. It was God's calling. Like, we felt like, okay. And I wasn't really happy about it because I enjoyed her. And I actually cried and I was saddened. But I knew it was God who was telling us. So we put her back in the public school, in a school that met her needs. And then because we built that foundation, she thrived. And I thought, oh my gosh, is she going to know how to talk to people? Right. And she was perfectly fine, Kids are kids. Kids make friends. It's a brand new year. And the school was very just open-armed. They were happy to have a new student. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like they were saying, I don't know, it all worked out. All I did was call the school, say I'd like to enroll, when is the enrollment period, and we did everything just, the time schedule that they said, and it was really very easy. And so she went back to school.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me because I couldn't see her anymore every day. But she thrived and she had fun and we loved it. And we knew it was God because she really was a light in the world.
Right.
And it was proof, yeah.
That's awesome. So no problem there, right?
Yep.
Okay. Now, the next question that I know we get a lot is regarding the difficulty, or maybe not as difficult, of having multiple kids, multiple ages, right? So now you're not a third grade teacher, you're a seventh grade, third grade, and a kindergarten teacher. And I know a lot of you guys can speak to that. So what were your concerns going into that? And were you right with those concerns? Was it not as bad as you thought? Speak into that a little bit.
I'll go first. When we first started, our kids were kindergarten, third, and fourth. And so I had a different curriculum for every single one of them, which super overwhelmed me. But then I found that we would be doing reading time, and I'd be doing reading time with Christian, and we'd be reading history, and Cambria and Kelly would kind of sit and they would listen at the same time, and I realized how much they were absorbing. And of course it might have been the first grader was absorbing at a different rate than the fourth grader, but I realized there were certain subjects that really lent itself to kind of being able to do the same curriculum for all of them, and then just expect different kinds of assignments from each of them. As they got older, once Christian was in middle school, once we got into middle school, and then for sure in high school, they each had their own curriculum for their own, for each of their subjects, because we wanted to make sure that we could prove to the colleges that they had taken all of the requirements to be able to get in. So we didn't want anybody ever having a question that Christian in 10th grade had taken something that his sister in 5th grade was taking, that kind of thing. So where the reality is it would have really been more the opposite. The youngest would have been doing the harder level curriculums, but still I didn't want there ever to be a question with those kind of things. So especially in elementary school, it's pretty easy to combine a lot of those things. There's certain things like reading, they need to read at their own levels, but even having the oldest read out loud what they're reading and the youngest is starting to hear and then asking questions about comprehension, you have a lot of reading that can be done that way, so it can be combined a lot, especially in the elementary school age. At least that's what we found. My older two actually went through math together all the way through until they were, I think it was, Christian was in 11th grade and Kelly was in 10th. They went from their first years all the way through doing the same math curriculum. Wow. Because the middle one was really advanced and would catch on and was super good with all of the concepts, and then the older was really good at the practical application, and so they actually worked together a lot.
Oh, wow. That's cool. So Abby, you got a wide range, and I really loved how you kind of articulated the difference. So I'll set this up. I'm thinking school is, these so many subjects. There's math and language arts and social studies and history and all these different subjects. So you had a great way of kind of compartmentalizing those subjects. So explain that to us a little bit.
Right. And again, and Crystal hinted at it, because there's curriculum, and I know that's kind of a question we'll get to a little bit, but and that's kind of a little bit what we're talking about. But and people can buy a box set, or you can get your own separate curriculum. But it's very daunting because you have all those different subjects. So what really comes down to is there's kind of two categories in what I call skill subjects. And content subjects. So skill subjects is based on skill. It's math and reading and phonics, spelling. And so that's based on your age, your grade level, and your skill. And that's something that is fairly independent, and that the child needs to do, and you might need to give them individual attention, or they can do individually. But then the content subjects, there's things like art, science, history, social studies, all those kind of things. And that's something that can be done as an entire group, as your whole family, and as what Crystal was talking about. So we could do something like we would read about Egypt, and we'll be reading it, and at the end of it, I will give my 7th grader an assignment to write a paper about the importance of the Nile, versus my kindergartner, which I'll have him do a coloring page on the Nile and have him write the word Nile and have him write the word Egypt. So he's practicing his letters. He's talking about alphabet. He's actually studying the Nile. Maybe even write him a scripture verse or something like that. Versus, again, my 7th grader and then my 5th grader, maybe he's doing a science project of the animal life and the plant life that's in Egypt. So again, you ratchet it based on the grade level and the skill level within the content of what's being done. And same with art and science. So you can do a science experiment as the entire family. And the kindergartners loving watching a volcano erupt. And so is the 7th grader. I mean, me as a 42-year-old is loving it just as much also. But, turning around and having the child, the 7th grader, talk about the molecular makeup of the subject versus, the kindergartner talking about bubbles. So, you kind of give that up. So that way, because you talk to families, and I get this a lot, and a lot of my other homeschool families get it. They look at families that have multiple age kids, and they go, oh my goodness, how do you do it all?
Right.
And it's because there's no way that I sit down and do 7 subjects with 3 kids. No, and there's not enough hours in the day.
Right.
There's not enough time, and there's not enough brain cells in this up here for me to deal with that. And so the way we as a homeschool community, the way that is done out there, and the more people you get to talk to, the more people you get to know, and again, it's about community, is you do it as a community too, that you do it in those content subjects. You start to, and you do it like those read alouds. You start to, again, just reading and just captivating them with those subjects. And so it breaks apart versus skills versus like, okay, my kindergartner needs to know basic addition, but also understanding how to say his numbers. And then my 7th grader needs to be doing algebra, but he can't be, and that's where he does something separate. And I know I need to schedule that time that he needs to be doing that. And that's where my scheduling and curriculum comes into play.
So it's no doubt more time consuming, but maybe not as time consuming as you would typically think.
Absolutely not. The time is more of like, the time is set aside to the skills. Those are set into different little brackets, and those can be, and then the big bracket of the content. And the content doesn't have to be done every day. Science doesn't need to be, like science, art, history, social studies, and doesn't need to be done every day 180 days. Like it might be you might do science every day for like 3 months, and then you do history. You kind of go in and out. Again, it goes back to, again, what Victoria was talking about. You find out what are the passions of your children. And that's the great thing about that you start to learn. So maybe you start to find out, my kid loves Australia. And then you end up spending the entire year in Australia because you end up studying the history of Australia, you study the science, you study the geography, you study the art. Like you could spend an entire year in Australia. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, because you end up finding the passion, and then that starts to go into just so many things. And then you start to see what ticks as you start having conversations, and the child ends up driving the train. You're not figuring out your lesson plan. You don't sit there and go, oh, what should I figure out that they should do? And they end up waking up the next morning or the next week, and they come and tell you, Mom, can we look up on YouTube, blah, 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 about this turtle, or I saw this about this, or so on. My friend mentioned about this. Can we show them this? And you'll start to realize they're really loving this. We need to find out. Right. And start asking these questions. Yeah. And they start asking to be taught. Mm-hmm. We're trying to teach them how to learn, not giving them the answers to the questions. Right. And I love that. Yeah. And that's our passion. And so yeah, that's the difference, the skill versus the content subject.
Yeah. I think also part of it's going to depend on the family dynamic, the personalities. We stuck pretty close to our curriculum, but when they would come up with some passion, then I did everything within my power to feed that passion. Mm-hmm. So Christian became very interested in robotics. And so I found a robotics club for him to get into. So I didn't for us, I didn't like switch the science where some families would. Some families would have just said, science is now going to be robotics. For us, I kept doing the curriculum that we had bought, but I made sure that he got into a robotics club. And he ended up actually being the president of the robotics club at a public high school when he was in high school, because he showed up every week and he was responsible. The guy who ran it was a believer, and he said he's more than welcome to come here, you know. So he got to do that, and then he went into mechanical engineering as part of an offshoot from those passions.
Yeah.
So we fed those passions whenever we could find them. My middle daughter
We'll
wanted
interject a little bragging here, because Christian, right? I know Christian. He's a friend of mine. Christian, I believe he's getting an internship from an organization that some of these people may be familiar with.
Yeah.
Some initials,
yeah,
NASA.
it's NASA.
I believe.
Yeah, he has an internship at NASA.
Okay, Christian, we see you, buddy. All right, that's
Coming
awesome.
up in fall, yeah.
Yeah. So,
As a word of encouragement, every August with our school, we get together with all the new families. And there's about usually 8 to 10 new families there, and they're all brand new, and their hands are going up, and they have all these questions, and they're all novices, they've never done it before. I'm just, as a word of encouragement, it is really amazing to see how fast they go from, I don't know what I'm doing, to like all these moms. Originally, when they first started, they were in the same boat as all the moms who are watching. It's like, we don't know what to do. And then really quick, you learn. And like with Abby, it's like I don't want to call you an authority, but you're an authority. And but they learn and they know and they jump into it.
Yeah.
And it's a short amount of time before they know a lot more than they thought they did.
Well, and I think that's important too, especially for the group that we're talking about that may be just considering homeschooling for this year. I know one of the thoughts is, okay, I'm going to go through all this. I'm finally going to figure this out, and then I'm going to be putting them back in school again. But it sounds like you guys are saying that learning curve is much faster. Like, it's not going to be a lost year. If they'll do the research, they'll get the curriculum. This will be a good year. Even if they only choose to homeschool this year, they'll learn that quick.
If it's only 1 year, it's the best year of their life, no matter what the results were.
Yeah.
It's going to be I'm seriously, because when I first went to homeschooling, I was very skeptical.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think you also find out that most parents are really worried about, they're saying like, oh, but my kids come home from school and I'm trying to get them to do their homework and we do nothing but fight. But most parents don't realize that you're getting your kid at the end of the day after they're tired and they really need a nap and they haven't eaten and they got in a fight with their best friend at school. So when you're actually doing this, you get the best part of them and they're getting the best part of you.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. I thought it was such a great point. Yeah, because I know. Yeah, you see them after they've been in the, all right, I'm learning now, and now I'm playing, and now I got to go back to learning again when I just want to go play. So having that, getting them right at the beginning, that's great. So curriculum, that's another thing that can be overwhelming. In researching this, right, I did a quick Google search and there were quickly 50 ads of, all types of curriculum. So what do you guys say? We can't get into curriculum. I do want to mention this, right? So depending on the response of how this panel goes, we are considering having very specified, possibly Zoom meetings where some of our panelists will have a specific topic to talk about. So don't worry, we'll look for opportunities to dive into the specifics of curriculum. Right now we're speaking very generally, but speaking generally, I'd never heard these terms, boxed sets and individualized curriculum. You guys brought up somebody that did curriculum by just taking their kid to a library. So how do you figure out this task of school year's coming up, I got to figure out a curriculum? How do you just go about that process?
Well, I think that, again, there are categories. So the terminology, box set, that's kind of a turnkey. So you can spend, and those are more expensive because as a parent, you're not having to figure anything out. You buy something at a fairly higher cost, but you get a box and everything's in it. You don't have to think about a thing. The books are in it, the manipulatives, all the little toys or, gadgets and things that would go, the accessories with it. Everything's in it for you, and it tells you what you're supposed to do and what your lessons are. And so you just don't have to think about anything. And there's lots of different companies, religious and not religious, tons of them out there. So that's a box set. And then there's individual curriculums. And so individual curriculums can be textbooks to even online now. They have online, you can do just a math course. And that can be to where like just the textbook is online, to like online sessions, to you buying just the textbooks in your home. So you can have individual curriculum, and so that's cheaper. And again, just like Elena was talking about, it gives you, your textbooks give you a table of contents and things like that, and it has quizzes and tests and workbooks and things, and so it will give you, and when they finish that math book, when they finish that curriculum, they'll be ready. That will be it.
And there's answer sheets.
Yes.
Yeah.
All parents,
You don't
it
have
all
to
comes
figure
with
out all the
answer
math.
sheets. And each one of these also have assessments. Every website, every one of these, all these companies have assessments for you to kind of understand where your kids should be able to pick up.
Yeah.
So that's individual. Then the most, I say, extreme, the opposite of the box set is completely free. The completely free version, in all honesty, at this point in the game, if you're considering it, is not really an option because it takes so much planning. There are so many free resources out on the internet, and they're wonderful. They're really wonderful. Most of the free stuff is more for the elementary school age, in all honesty, but it takes so much time and so much planning. So that becomes your job. I mean, our job is being teachers in homeschool. So
Right.
it is a full-time job, but it's so much more of a job if you go the free route.
Right.
So the curriculum, so kind of the blended is more of, and what you see most homeschooling families do, majority of people I know, do the blended of free resources with that subject content the content subject I was talking about, where they take their library card and they use it for their art, their history, their social studies, and that kind of stuff. And they buy the individual subjects for their language arts and their math. That's the tended.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
tended.
Yeah, Elaine, I know we talked about this. I mean, because you've had experience. I think you did box sets, right? And then the individual. Like, so, what's your experience been? If you were to give advice to a family that has never done this before, I mean, obviously there's different, there's costs and things like that. But
Right.
just in your experience, what would you say?
The box sets are definitely easy because it's all there together. Even teacher guides telling you what to say, what to write on the board. It's very, very simple.
Oh, wow.
But there definitely is the curriculum that you can piece together that would be more affordable. And we kind of do a mixture of both now. And with my younger ones, I kind of go with the box set. Just to get the good foundation with phonics and stuff like that, and then we do piece it together. But there is a lot of curriculum out there. It can be overwhelming, but again, it depends on your family. It depends on how much time you want to put into something. It depends on your child, the style of their learning. If
Yeah.
they love books, you can go like a literary route where you just do a lot of books. So it really depends on your family and on your child. And that's where kind of the flexibility comes in too. Because depending on your family and your individual children, you can find what works for your family.
Okay. So say they pick a curriculum, and I know you guys have mentioned, at least in the long haul, if you're trying a curriculum and it just didn't work, you try something different. Is that more of like an annual decision, or I mean, have you ever had a situation where you just like, this isn't working mid-year?
I've done it mid-year.
Yeah?
Yeah, my son was miserable with the math curriculum that we chose. I had
Wow.
done it with my daughter. She loved it. She did great. Did it with my son, and it was like tears every day.
Wow.
And it was like, this isn't worth it. He's miserable, I'm miserable. And so we just scratched it and tried something else, and it worked a lot better.
Wow. So that's a great point, because if this is your first go around and you get that bad curriculum, you don't know it's bad curriculum. You just think this is how my kid is responding to homeschooling. But fortunately, you had another child where you were like, wait, the issue isn't my child, it's the curriculum. And so you had a much better experience with the next one.
Right.
So mid-year, and again, it comes back to that flexibility. If it's not working, drop it and figure out what works.
And I think another part of that too is getting to know somebody. So something that this panel talked about before is getting into a community and getting into a group, whether that
Yeah.
group is just one or two people, and just getting into, and once you get into a community, it's like the floodgates open. Again, like Jeff was saying, it's that unknown. It's so scary. It's so daunting. But that learning curve is so quick. And part of that is because you get surrounded with people that just welcome you with such open arms and just recognize and validate you of like, oh yes, I remember this, and it's totally understandable, and this is how it felt, and it's okay, and it's gonna be fine, and this is what you do. And part of that goes with the curriculum, and you can like go, this is just not working, and you have those support of those people around you and go, oh, have you tried this? Or I've heard this about this. And so you get the review of some of that curriculum, and then you can also get used curriculum that way. You can get that from other people in the community of going, oh yeah, I used that for she used it for her first child. And then it's like, this did not work for my second one. But she kept it for maybe her later, or she can let you borrow it for maybe yours, or vice versa. And so that's how we also get used curriculum.
I know when we were talking, because again, I'm the target audience here, right? So I feel like there's certain questions that I know that I have, but one of the things I ask you guys to inform me of is what are the questions that I don't even know to ask? And I was just blown away. This whole idea of community was, all of you, the idea of like, oh, if you're going to try to do this alone, every single one of you went, oh no, that's a horrible idea, right? And I was like, oh, that's probably what I would have done. I would have just gotten my little book and gone into the kitchen and been like, here, kid, do this, but you guys, you all felt so strongly. So again, I just wanted you guys so two things on community. One, it's not just a word that we're throwing out there. You reference it can be a lot of different styles of community. There's like the co-op, or there's just finding a few friends that are going through this that you have someone to talk to. So you've never done this before. You have no community. Like where does that even begin? Where did you guys find your community? How do you find community? What advice would you give to somebody who's looking, they hear that and they go, oh, that makes sense. I need community. And you can't just go to the library and check it out. You have to find it. So where do you find it,
Well, first of all, your first community is going to be the church at Rocky Peak. The mere fact that you're doing this, they're going to be in little Zoom calls. They're going to all of a sudden start connecting. I had two moms send me a text 2 days ago saying, we don't know what to do about curriculum. Can we meet with you and your wife? And we're also meeting with Terry. And we're getting together on Saturday. And then a third mom came to me and said, I don't know what to do about curriculum. I said, hey, we're having to get together on Saturday. You're going to find it. But I think one of your main Zoom calls should be maybe new families are doing this. They're going to meet each other. So a lot of it is they're all starting at the same time. They meet each other. They're gonna iron sharpen iron each other.
Yeah.
They just are. And so I think that's one of the things. I guess what I was going to say is really don't be alone. That's what we talked about the other day was don't walk into this alone. And I'm not sure if this next message is for the wives or the husbands, but when it comes to when my wife, never in my life have I more had the deer in the headlight look than when my wife talked to me about curriculum. I felt like that dad in Inside Out, and I was just blank, and she asked me a question like, oh no, we got to answer her. Right. And I was like, whatever you think, honey. It's really, the moms are usually the ones who are going after the curriculum, but as a dad, jump in where you can, and we're going to talk about more of that later, but you got to be as supportive as you can, but curriculum's hard. I don't understand it. And my wife, everything they've said, my wife has gone through all that. But again, it's the same thing as you start off without knowing, and later on you do know.
Okay, that's great, awesome. Now, the practical side of this, right, is cost, right? Obviously, there's a wide variety of costs, and so we don't really need to discuss this too much, as much as just informing our audience, right? I know out here, private school has a wide range of costs. So I'm thinking, is homeschooling anything like that? But according to you guys, it can be anywhere from, okay, you can do it for free, but that's, if this is your first go, that's kind of crazy. And then, but you're looking at anywhere for a year of curriculum, average maybe like 500, 700, and then it could go as low as 200, as much as 2,000, but that's kind of, you guys would say that's kind of like a ballpark range. Now, do you find that, I know with the box sets, it's kind of more plug and play. how does it look? Like, is there curriculum out there for parents who are like, we are tag teaming this. We each have 45 minutes or an hour a day to give. We're trying to, fill in the gaps because we're both working. Like, is that like a box set thing that they should be looking for because of that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think necessarily. I think they can do that with anything that they choose. Any curriculum, you can make that work. It's, again, the flexibility, it's your scheduling. If dad can do math, but he can't do it till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then that's what works for that family. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a box set. It can be pieced together curriculum. It can be online. It can be I think you can do that with any curriculum.
Yeah. And you guys mentioned there's used resources out there, which is a great thing. And I think that's where this community piece is going to be a really big deal. And also, we're going to try to provide that as well, like through these Zoom calls. And Jeff, you just hit it right there. To go out and look for that community. And you can already see where it's benefiting to get in touch with one of you guys and say, this is the curriculum I'm thinking about. This is our situation. So what me and my wife, me and my husband are going through. Are we crazy? Would this work? As opposed to just diving in and finding out the hard way, So I think that's a great thing. All right. So I do want to get into a couple of kind of like specific questions like we had talked about. So Victoria, you said something in your story that really stood out to me. So your daughter, Lourdes, she's in RPK. She's amazing. She's super smart. And I thought it was very interesting in your story that you said that she actually, that journey from doing homeschooling back to public school, back to homeschooling, that she was actually really excited to kind of find out that she was going back to the homeschooling, right?
Actually, yes. And she loved being in the public school because she thrived. She had friends. She had a community there. But every year, and you can see her in her prayer journals, and I just remember constantly she was praying since the moment we took her back to public school, praying and asking God, please homeschool me again. Aww. And I told her, I said, well, if it's God's plan, he will answer you, and you will know, he will tell you when. And that was kind of her thing, just to keep her peace. If it is his plan, you will be homeschooled again. We don't know when. And but she prayed for it. And she's always been a huge advocate at church and everywhere else, like, oh, homeschooling is the best. And a lot of our friends here at Rocky Peak have used her to say, if for their kids that are going to be homeschooled, they say, talk to Lourdes. She loves homeschooling. Calm them, So Lourdes is definitely one of the homeschooling cheerleaders.
Yeah.
So it was answer to prayer to be back to homeschooling for her.
Yeah.
Because she felt like it was more valuable for her to be able to learn at her pace, with the way she enjoyed learning most, where she wasn't going to get that at a public school.
Yeah.
And so that was the real reasoning behind her wanting to be homeschooled again, that she was able to do it at her pace. And another huge aspect was her being able to actually be here at CBS and do the community Bible study here. She missed that aspect tremendously.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that kind of speaks to the flexibility, right? And again, I grew up, Abby said, homeschooling's changed so much since I was a kid. But we'll go right through it, right? It's like, oh, homeschooling kids aren't social. Absolutely not. I mean, your guys' kids are like the most social kids that I know. But that's what it is. There's so many different opportunities, and you have the flexibility. CBS, which takes place during a school day, she gets to be a part of it because of the homeschool and the flexibility. There's all kinds of ways to socialize and for those kids to get that social interaction. They're not just stuck at home all day. And then even the athletics, right? We got a NCAA Division I athlete over here, right? Or Division II athlete. So that's, there's just this whole idea. It's just changed a lot. Now, I did want to mention too, you said the ability to kind of tie in like Christian values into the education was a big plus for you and for Lourdes, right? So how does that look, having those Christian values in the education?
So I mentioned CBS. So the fact that we can discuss throughout the day or during that section, that time of day where we get to study the Bible. And with the CBS, they pick a book of the Bible every year, and that's what they focus on. And they have a book, and they have a study guide, and so you get to really study that book. And so it was a beautiful thing for her to just do something that probably most don't get, because you don't have that opportunity to be in front of a teacher to do that, and then go home and study it throughout the week because you have little study to do, just like a life group. And so so that was one part. But if, for example, in history, when she was in those elementary years, we got to study the history of Christianity, and that was embedded within the history lesson. Like, how did it begin? How did Judaism begin? How did, and we got to study those characters like Moses and all these characters that have impacted our belief system and so it's beautiful to have them see where they are coming from. And I remember her being a little first grader and just being like wowed by that. And that impacted the rest of her years in history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Crystal, I want to ask you real quick too, because I know that a lot of the parents that are tuning in, Kids in Wildlife, Revolution, some middle school, high school age kids, and you've had that experience. So, talk about a daunting task when it's like, oh, my kid's supposed to be taking, AP US history or calculus, So, what would you say to those parents, what they're going through right now, making this decision?
So specifically, like in high school, I assume.
Sure.
Yeah? In high school, we did do some online classes, and then my girls both took their senior year over at Moore Park. And so almost all of their classes, they did college classes, so they ended up going into their universities with a full year worth of college underneath their belt.
Oh, wow.
And they were able to take all GE classes, and so they all automatically transferred, which was a great thing. I would say both of them are a little salty at me that I didn't start them earlier, which was really just me being like, okay, hey, did we really do a good job? Are they really going to be able to compete?
Yeah.
And there was no problems in any way, shape, or form. I didn't put Christian in, but again, part of that had to do with my insecurity that like maybe we weren't cutting it. So I did some of those online classes that we took that were specifically for high schools were AP equivalents, but we didn't challenge the AP exam. He did take the subject exams for the SATs within those classes. And then we definitely did things like we did SAT prep classes, those kind of things to make sure that when they were going into college, I definitely did my research at colleges to make sure that they had met all of the requirements, so they weren't going to, try to get into a school and the school was saying, oh, you need to have a fine art. You didn't have a fine art.
Right.
So I made sure that stuff is really easy to find. It's really, really easy to find this is what's expected. You're expected to have 2 years of a foreign language. And I actually found somebody who was teaching Spanish. And so my kids went to somebody's house and had a private teacher to teach them Spanish because, well, my last name is Fernandez. I am not fluent. And there was no way that was going to be something. I didn't want them to just do that in the video. I wanted somebody telling them whether they were doing it right or not.
Right.
So personally, because I did had other people come alongside to help with the schooling in high school, actually at that point I just became a manager. And they were also independent by that time. It was more asking the questions of like, hey, did you do your work? And then checking up to make sure that they had completed the work. If they had any questions for a couple of the online classes, they had actually had live teachers, and so it was more like a webinar, and the teachers would do would give out the assignments, and so they would be actually have to like interact with the teachers. The teachers would just interact with the parents through email if there was any questions or problems, or there was one time when we were going to be out of town when something needed to be turned in. So I contacted the teacher and said, can we turn it in early or can they turn it late? That, find out what was best for the teacher.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Jeff, I know you got experience with this too. I mean, was there anything that you would add to that? I mean, as far as like the junior college or?
Well, yeah, I mean, when we did our graduation this year in June, we had 15 graduates. 2 of the girls who were sisters, same age, same grade, they graduating them as seniors, and they were both wearing their Pierce College sash. They both had fully completed Pierce College. So at that graduation, they were done with junior college, and I was graduating them from high school. So it's kind of like one of those unknown or hidden secrets that people don't know, but it's dual credit. You get dual credit for doing them.
And it's free.
And it's free, and it's free to boot. So
you have to buy your books, but if you go in as a high schooler, you don't pay for the college.
Really?
There's a lot of benefit. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's just another unknown. And then with Carly, I mean, I guess I don't want to keep on bragging, but we use the same thing, and Carly just finished 9th grade, and she's already 25% of the way done through Moore Park. And she's doing well.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's amazing.
It is.
And there's so many other opportunities. Even I believe Masters University, they were offering summer school classes for homeschool kids. And I know a couple of kids who got full credit and they took Masters University. One of them was in 9th grade and one was in 10th grade, but Masters University offers things. There's a lot of people who offer you things. If you get creative, you can get a lot accomplished. And your kids are up for the challenge.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I'm sure it's not easy, but
it's not.
Yeah,
no, it's not.
And you want to make sure that they're maturity-wise, they're ready to be able to go into a situation. I mean, I know for our kids, it definitely rang true that they had a lot of knowledge of what was out there, but they were still fairly sheltered. They had not, their friends were not all going out and drinking and partying and that kind of thing like that. So I think that was one of my concerns. But they went in, and the girls would just kind of roll their eyes at the things that they would hear people saying, and then they'd get in their car and drive home. It didn't affect them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, Carly, all of hers were online, so she didn't have to interact with anybody.
Okay.
I mean, at least as a 9th grade, being with, that is a concern. But
yeah.
Hers were all online.
Gotcha. So, Jeff, while we got you on the mic here, being our male representative here, what does it look like for like a husband? So, not in all cases, but traditionally, the mom's going to kind of take that main role, and the husband comes along to support her. So, what do you say to husbands out there? What's the best way if their wife is going to kind of take on this role? How do they support their wives?
Well, I do have this. My wife said, make sure you bring notes, because I do want to answer this question correctly and slowly. So she said, read your notes, which I absolutely will. So first one is, this is really important. Ask your wife how you can help. That's a really important factor, is just because your wife she's doing it. I've had some dads who actually have taken the role. They're stay-at-home dads. I know dads who have done the homeschooling, but for the majority, it's the wives. So you need to ask your wife how you can help. Number 2, you definitely have to be supportive. If they're alone in this and they don't feel your support, that's really alone. I mean, no, it doesn't matter how many friends she has with her or supporting her, she needs your support. Join in when and where you can. There are times that I did homeschooling. I'm not the most patient teacher when it comes to it, and I really was like, and please don't let me teach math. There's certain things you can do and there's certain things you can't do. And the last one is be on the same page and have the same goals as your wife. So when you go into this, make sure you're on the same page. Make sure you're agreeing to do this, because if there's a division going in, that could be really rough. And those are the main things. Just really connect with your wife and be there for her.
I think that's a really great point for what we're talking about, even for this, a large group of people that, they need to be on the same page. And so that's something that we would encourage all of you guys. If you're not on the same page, just continue to pray about it. And hopefully God will lead you guys to be on the same page, whether it's 1 year, whether it's for the rest of their, education, whether it's to stay and do the public school thing this year. Be on the same page. Yeah, you do not want to go into this year with one of them saying, see, we should have done the homeschooling or vice versa, to be on the same page so that you can get through any challenges together. I think it's really, really great.
Well, and I remember when I first joined the one school we were at, they were interviewing us, and one of the main guys on the board looked at me, goes, in a very serious way, he goes, right at me, he goes, "Why do you want to homeschool?" And I looked at him, I go, "I don't, she does." And it was just like, I wasn't prepared for it. And he's like asking me point blank, I'm like, I'm not ready for this. But through the years, I absolutely changed. And so all husbands may not be at that point, but trust, pray about it, and you'll see the results, and you'll be astonished.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. So in this time, there's a couple things I want to do, but one thing that I wanted to do was resources, right? So I would encourage you guys, we're live, this link is going to be up after this, but if you have paper handy, grab a pen, because we're going to go through some resources. I know I asked you guys to think about this a little bit. So if you were to give a resource to parents right now, they're just at the beginning of this journey, what are some resources that they can write down right now and just go ahead and start exploring this? Go ahead, Elena.
I would say Teaching from Rest by Sarah Mackenzie. It's a book, and she also has a podcast, but it is it has such good information. I read the book often. I pull it out, and it's just so encouraging as a mom. So I would definitely recommend her book and her podcast, Sarah Mackenzie.
Okay. All right. Other resources?
I would say that because we talked about the importance of finding that community, that social media and Facebook can be a great place to be able to find homeschool groups, to be able to find in your local area, not just places where you could find a class, although you might be able to do that, but find other like-minded families who have kids similar ages that are in your area, or even maybe they're not. Maybe it's a national thing, but people are posting articles, or it's a forum that you could ask questions, or even just vent, because there will be days that you're just going to need to say, "Hey, I just need you to listen," and fall apart a bit, and then kind of gather yourself and go, "Okay, I got to go teach math. Bye. I got to talk to you later. Bye."
Yeah.
Mine, I love the podcast that Elena mentioned. It's a Read Aloud Revival. Is actually the podcast is fantastic. Also, the book Brave Learner, written by Julie Bogart. It's phenomenal, and she has a fantastic Instagram account. It's just really encouraging and exciting. Just prompts that she puts up there of just of curious ways to kind of ask your child, and just magic ways to kind of think of learning and to challenge you, but it's also just to encourage you.
There's another resource, just so you don't feel alone, but it's HSLDA. It's a legal defense that has for homeschoolers. Mm-hmm. You can join that. They will back you legally if you have any problems. It makes you also not feel alone. And on their website, when you join it, they'll send you emails, and it gives you a lot of other stories about what other people are dealing with. So they have resources, just stories and resources about homeschooling, and it makes you not feel alone to know that someone legally has your back.
Yeah, well, and especially if this is your first year doing this, and that's a huge concern. Like I said, thinking it through, it's like, man, are you going to get 2 weeks into this, and someone's going to knock on the door, and you've done something wrong, you haven't pulled your kid out the right way, and they're like, your kid's been absent for 2 weeks. So, yeah, I remember hearing about that resource. So it's HSLDA, right?
Yes.
So it's I
don't know the A, but Homeschool Legal Defense Association?
Yeah.
It also
HSLDA.
has, by state, the exact laws and what you have to do in order to homeschool.
That's
so
great.
Step by step, you can look it up too. So that's on there as well.
Okay. Victoria?
I love this saying, especially now, like it takes a village. And I'm just going to echo the fact that we should stay in our, just reach out and ask. And I did a lot of that because at Rocky Peak, there are so many parents that homeschooled and have amazing experience. So I just picked everybody's brain. And being a part of that community, that really has been a blessing to our whole family, And so I want to definitely bless somebody else. And so I'm more than happy to share what I've learned, experienced with others. And this is something I just learned recently. And it is it's not free, but Dave Ramsey has a financial course for kids from elementary
Oh, wow.
to high school.
Yeah.
And I mean, who doesn't need that, right?
Right.
And so, so that resource, I would definitely encourage people to go to Dave Ramsey's website and check out their resources for kids.
So just as we kind of wrap up here, first of all, just to encourage our families, right? We are going to be reaching out to you guys, and I know that you probably still have a ton of questions, and we're going to be looking for opportunities to get those answered in more detail as they come up. But as we kind of wrap up here, I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity. I know in speaking with you guys, you're all so encouraging, and even as a parent, you make me feel like I could do this. I can do this. So if you guys want to give any last words of encouragement to our families, to anybody that's tuning in right there, I just wanted to give you guys the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I would just say that you can absolutely do this. And if it's what God is calling you to do, then He will equip you. Mm-hmm. Just show up every day and lean on the Lord, and you can do it. And distant learning at the end of last year was not homeschooling what it looks like what we do. That was hard for everybody. That wasn't an easy task for anyone. And I think all of us as homeschooling parents felt for all of those parents.
Yeah.
So don't let that reflect or think that that's going to determine what this year could look like, because it will be different. And just that you can do it, for sure.
Yeah.
And I would say extend yourself grace and extend your kids grace, and that there are going to be moments that are really rough, and the Lord gets to actually refine you through that. And the more you can extend yourself grace, say you're sorry when you're frustrated or flustered, the more that they're going to have that soft heart towards you. And it really can be a beautiful thing in those moments.
Amen. I agree with those completely. And I think that we have to remember, too, that none of this surprises God at all. Even if any of it surprises us, and that we just have to continue to remind ourselves that we were created to be the parents of our children, first and foremost. If He's called us to homeschool, that comes second. But He's wired us to be that, and He's equipped us for that, exactly what they need. And He didn't equip a different person to homeschool my kids. He equipped me. And it's supposed to look exactly that, for exactly that reason, for my kid in exactly that way. And it might look completely different than anybody else. And that's okay. And if it doesn't work out and he slides behind, your kid doesn't work out, it's going to be okay. And it really will. And again, just giving yourself that grace and your child that grace, and just continuing to give your child over to God. It's God's child. And we just have to be good stewards. And He loves your child so much, and He loves you so much, and He has great things for this season. He really has great things to come out of this. And just get a community, and good things are going to come.
And at our school, when we do the graduation, we give the parents an opportunity to talk to the kids, and the kids that talk to the parents. And one of the things they always say, somebody says in one way or the other, is, Mom, Dad, there have been good times, there have been bad times, there have been laughter, there have been tears. But then they go, I just want to thank you so much for what you've done for me. And that's really the core of it, is that it's there's a lot of emotion. It isn't easy. There's a lot of emotion, but when all is said and done, your child knows that you put this time into them, and they very much appreciate it.
Yeah.
In the Bible verse that I'm reminded of right now is, what the enemy meant for evil, the Lord will turn around for His good. And I would just encourage parents to spend a lot of time with the Lord, pray. That's what gets me through this whole thing, because He'll lead you. He leads me, and I think that Pastor Michael's been, hitting it on the nail. Put the armor of God on, that belt of truth, because the enemy will try to, speak to you, and you got to tune him out. And you got to really remember the truth, and that God will equip you, and He is there for you, and He's with you, and the Holy Spirit will guide you, and just to rest in that peace.
That's awesome. Oh man, thank you guys so much. All right, well let's close out in prayer, and we'll wrap up here. So, God, we just come before you tonight, and again, just thank you so much for this panel and the wisdom that they bring. And God, right now, I just want to pray for every family, every parent at home, regardless of where they were when this conversation started. God, I just know that you're moving on their hearts, and God, our prayer is that each one of their kids ends up exactly where you want them to be. So if they feel led to continue with the public school or the private school that they're in, or they feel led to take that leap and dive into homeschool, God, our prayer is that they are where you want them to be, that you have a calling on their lives, and you know where they need to be, and that you would just give us as parents the wisdom and the discernment and the courage to put them right in that right spot. And so, God, I know all the questions aren't answered right now, but I do know that we can listen and we can follow. And so I just pray that your voice would be loud and clear in the hearts of our families right now, and that they would know just exactly the route that they need to take. And even if that is a very unfamiliar route, that you would give them the courage and the resources that they need in order to navigate that well. We thank you for this evening. We thank you for what you're doing in the lives of us as parents and in the lives of our kids. And we thank you for your plans and your purpose. And we're so excited to be a part of your kingdom. We thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, before we go, I just want to thank Elena, Crystal, Abby, Jeff, Victoria. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. And I also want to thank all of our other parents that homeschooled. We had so many parents that we could have had up here on this panel that would have just done a fantastic job too. And you guys were such an influence even in their lives. And so your words were heard here through them. And so thank you for that. Thanks for joining us, and look for more information in the future. Have a good night, guys.